Well, good morning, everybody. Let me begin by saying congratulations. Everybody turned their clocks correctly, so you're here. This is the second part of our four-part series that the Christian Ed Committee is doing about ministries of the church. So this morning we're going to hear about different ministries that have to do with worship. The Altar Guild, Betty Ruiz is going to speak upon that. Lee Williams is going to talk about Lady Eucharistic Ministers. Ralph is going to share his experience and joy of ushering. And Anne Marie is going to share about her experience and enjoyment of being in the choir. So welcome, everybody. So what I think we'll just start with as we begin, which is really to just hear more about their experiences of being a part of the ministry, is first, why don't you just introduce yourselves and talk about, how long or what you've been doing in that ministry, and then you can each share a little bit about the ministry. Betty, would you like to begin?
Yes.
And please use the mic.
I have been involved with the Altar Guild for 50 years. It is a service that seems to happen behind the scenes. I'm sure this morning, if you were at church, that you saw the chalice and the wine at the back of the room. Maybe before it was taken forward. You notice that the altar has an altar cloth on it. The priest has a stole. Everything is all put together, and that has happened long before you all got here. And it happens every single service. And you have a group of women who are utterly devoted to that procedure. We speak a different language. We talk about chalices and alms and all kinds of things. People who first began are like, I am never going to remember all of those names. But eventually it comes to you, and everything that you see on that altar has got a name. Some of the things off the altar have its own name. That little place where consecrated wine and bread is kept, if it has not been used, is called an ombre. And that's that little pretty thing over to the left of your face. And it's got lights now. I was thrilled to see lights. It was so pretty. And that's where that goes. There are rules and regulations. Any wine that's left over is poured down a special place and goes directly to the ground. So there are all these things that you have to learn, but we learn them together. And it's a wonderful service, truly. So we urge those of you who haven't tried it, come and join us.
And remind you to introduce yourself and then pass it to Ralph, and then we'll go back. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Anne Marie Boucher.
I'm Ralph Clark.
Lee Williams.
Lee, why don't you start and talk about your ministry with the Lady Eucharistic Ministers just for a couple of minutes? That'd be great.
Sure. So LEM is an acronym that is a lot easier to use than Lay Eucharistic Minister. So when you hear that, you'll know what people are talking about. So I think you're aware of the fact that the people on the altar wear different clothing, which is out of respect and devotion. And we act in a little different way. We try not to do things incorrectly. We've been trained. Susie's going to do another training session, March 23rd at 9:30. And you'll learn lots of things because she'll walk you through it. And she'll tell you, okay, now you can do this, or no, you don't want to do that. And it's not difficult. And once you get used to it, you just kind of do it automatically. If you have to carry the cross and serve, one person usually does that. if you're reading, another person's usually doing that. And by the way, if you're reading, do yourself a favor and practice the day before. And I practice out loud, because if I can hear myself, I know what it sounds like. And so it helps you, so that when you get up there on Sunday, you're like, oh, okay, I know how to do this. Well, I think that probably covers
I'm
it.
going to add a little addendum to what Lee said, which is that on the 23rd, we're training laborers and visitors, which are the people that bring the consecrated wine and wafers, the bread and the wine, to people that are homebound and sick. And so we also do that ministry in addition to the lay Eucharistic ministers, which are the ones that serve on the altar. And Lee gave a wonderful, and I'm going to add another thing to Betty and Lee. They're very fun. You really have a good time doing all that stuff. It's fun, right? Oh, yeah.
I really enjoy it.
Yes. Wow.
So, I'll talk a little bit about ushering. It's a very complicated duty. I've been doing it for about 20 years here. I did before that in Connecticut. The reason I joined the usher corps was that Dave Washburn said to me, "Would you usher?" And I said, "Yes." The requirements are very, very deep. You have to be able to smile. You have to show up. And you have to get here about half an hour before everybody else. And that's about it. The training is fairly brief, but we do it. And the thing that it's really quite a wonderful ministry, as simple as it is. It's about welcoming people and saying hi, getting to know them. So it's a nice thing, and particularly a good ministry for people who have not been in the church for this church for a long time, because it's a way all of a sudden you get to know everybody. You don't get to know them in a deep way, you don't get to know their families, but you get to know them, their name, and you can greet them and welcome them, and people do love to be welcomed.
So the music ministry, I think you're all very familiar with it. It is to provide music for the worship service. The requirements to do this are you have to want to do it. That's really the only requirement. We do not audition people. We invite people to come and sit with us. If they don't even think they know how to sing, they're welcome to come and sit with us and get used to it. Jenny here is a victim of this. and basically the object here is to animate the worship service and to bring to it a sense of joy and community and beauty. That's the hope. It doesn't always work out that way, but we do our best. We try to incorporate individual talents as much as possible so that people can perform solos or bring their musical instruments or anything like that. Our director, Eric, prepares sound files for us to practice outside of our regular rehearsal time, which is on Friday at 5 o'clock. And of course we have to follow, I'm sorry.
No.
12 o'clock, no, yes, noon. It's noon. Sorry, I'm thinking.
Is that daylight savings time?
It's at noon, and I have to say my roommate got up at 5 o'clock this morning because she was so sure I was going to oversleep. Yeah, it's at 12 o'clock noon, which time was to avoid the worst of the traffic on the way on a Friday. But some people can't make that Friday rehearsal, or they can't always make it, so that's not an absolute requirement. But enjoying and loving singing and loving this community is a requirement.
Thank you, Andrea. That was wonderful. You know what I would love to hear, and we'd all love to hear, is why do you do this ministry? What drew you to it? Lee?
Well, I don't know. I've been doing it since I was 37.
That's only been a couple of years.
So 5 years ago.
Oh, maybe 3. Yeah. I started doing it because, well, frankly, I had a conversion experience.
Why don't you share a little bit of that first? So you just talk about your personal, how you grew in your faith through this ministry.
Well, I used to go to church because my mother told me I had to. And because I said to my kids, I had to do it, you're gonna do it. But then something happened, and I was standing at the kitchen sink, and I was really upset. And I was just, and I don't know what I was upset about. And I stood there, and I remember this clearly. I said, God, this is your fault. And the following Sunday, I thought, I think I'm going to go to that Bible study in between services. I had never opened a Bible. Anyhow, that's the beginning of the journey. And then I got interested in doing this ministry, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's just a great way to serve. And that's what we are, right?
Yes.
Servants.
Yes. You're all part of the ministry team at all of our services. Ralph, could you talk for a little bit about what drew you to ministry and your faith journey through the work you do at the church?
So, I was being a little flip on this ministry, but it is a ministry, and it's a part of the service. And we not only welcome and greet, but we seat, and we move people around, and we collect, and we do all of those things, and we're a part of the communion process. So it's a part of the service, and it's nice to be a part of the service. My own view, why did I already told you why I did it, because I said, would you usher? And I said, yeah. But on a general level, it's something to be a part of the team. And it's important. Ministry, faith is an active thing. It's not, there are contemplatives. I'm not one of those. I'm an active person, and to be an active part of this community, it is a real community. You have to raise your hand. That's a good thing. So, you not only are welcoming and greeting people and helping them get a place to sit and all of that, but you get to know people, and I probably know everybody's first name. I certainly do everybody in this room. And typically, except for visitors, I'll know everybody's name as they come in. And people like to be called by their name. They like to be greeted, and they like to feel welcome. And visitors love to feel welcome, and they come back when they feel welcome, as opposed to just going in and sitting down and worshiping and whatever. So there is a real come and see part of it. And it's good to be a part that way. We're recruiting, we're always recruiting for ushers. It's a great thing to do. Unfortunately, most of you are all very busy people committed to some other ministry. So you're not the crowd that I need to talk to. But it's the kind of thing too with your friends and other people in the parish. Mention to them, it's a nice way to get to know the other members of the parish and become a part of the parish. And so we only have, for example, at the 8 o'clock service, we only have 4 ushers, 4 couples that usher. And we don't have, and I schedule that group. And that's a real major commitment. That takes me about an hour a month to do the schedule. But, I could use someone to schedule the people at the 8 o'clock. We only have 4 ushers at 8 o'clock. We're actually a little short on ushers at the 10:30 service for various reasons. People do move away from the process over time. So we're always looking for additional people. You might mention that to anybody that is looking for something that's easy to get to do. And it's a nice way to get started. My favorite story about ushering is Sylvia Longacre. I know she wouldn't mind mentioning her name. Sylvia loved usher. She just loved it. And she would come up to me every week and say, I'm so happy that I get to usher. It was just great. And I hooked her up with Rookie, and she was marvelous. She looked at her with Rookie. So it's a fun thing.
Thank you, Ralph. And if you want to talk about why you do this ministry and how it helps grow your faith.
Why I do the ministry is, it started out because I love to sing. I joined this church, I didn't even join the church, I joined the choir because I love to sing. But making music in community to me is very important. And I think that, I've sung for other churches before, it's not the first time. This is the first church that drew me in and converted me to being having an active faith. And I think part of that was the music over many years. Those beautiful words, such beautiful music just worked in me. I'm sure that's true. Music is so important in worship. It encodes emotion. It creates a sense of community. I am literally preaching to the choir here. Beauty in the liturgy has been appreciated since the earliest church fathers, and I think Irenaeus of Lyon talks about the importance of having all the senses involved, including incense, scent and sound and bodily movement, and all of that is important in the liturgy. It helps encode memory, and it also makes the words bite more deeply. Like one of the reasons some of you may notice I come to every service practically, but one of the reasons is every time I go through the liturgy, I hear something different. Every time I sing, I hear the words differently. And the music, set to beautiful music, those words dig into you, and they come back to you later. You remember them better because they're in your muscle memory and in your auditory memory. So that meaning, that encoded meaning, connects to the emotion of being in the group and also identity. Like creates a sense of group identity. When we changed the words of some of the hymns in the Lutheran Church, people flipped out because those are not our words. It's not our tune. And it's true. Even in pop culture, people have their music, right? We have our music. And sharing that, I think, is terrific. So as you can tell, I love doing this. And there's one other thing I want to say about this, which is the choir. The choir is the most amazing collection of stellar golden human beings I have ever been in.
There's 4 of them sitting right there. The ones with the halos on their red shirt.
I cannot overemphasize the importance of being among people who are better than I am. Morally and spiritually, it has been such an amazing, that is for me the conversion experience, is being exposed to people who really walk the walk, who have, like Dorian says, a servant heart. And I feel like I'm always better from that exposure. So in terms of my faith journey, that's been very important to me.
Debbie, could you share about why you're in that ministry and how it helped your faith journey, or you did it?
I was strict. Honestly, was strict. I was brand new to the church. We had just moved to Louisville and had decided to unify ourselves in the Episcopal Church. I had been raised Methodist, my husband a Roman Catholic. And we decided it was high time that we stopped going our separate ways and united ourselves after 17 years of marriage. And I got a wonderful invitation from my rector, my new rector. And it was invited to a lovely tea at a lady's house. And I thought, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity. Of course I'm going to go. And it was a beautiful tea, a silver tea service, and lovely things to eat. And everybody's so sweet and nice to me. And when we got through, our rector said to me, welcome, Betty, to the altar.
What was in the tea?
So there you go. And actually, it was probably the best thing that happened to me because I was so curious about how things worked in the Episcopal Church. And let me tell you that's one good way to learn. And so it has been an adventure, and I have been completely devoted to it. It has filled my life. And I have retired now, and I miss it. I really miss it. But it has fallen into the hands of someone who can handle it quite nicely. And I didn't have to trick her.
Thank you, Betty. We'd like to welcome you back to the altar field. Thank you, Betty. We wanted to open it for questions, but I have a question for Betty. Could you talk a little bit about if you don't know all the things that are called and that there are ways of learning that aren't that difficult?
It absolutely doesn't matter whether you know the proper names or not. You're going to come to, when you get to be my age, you're going to hate to be remembering anyway. So it's just a matter of being able to do it. To know that you have got to have that chalice, you've got to have that purificator, you've got to have that pattern, you've got to have the wafer, and then you've got to be able to put the veil on and all of that stuff. But you will learn to do it, and it will get to the point where it's absolutely automatic for you.
Thank you, Betty. We'd like to open it to questions. The choir's all leaving. Well, peace be with you. Does anybody have any questions for our wonderful group of panelists here about the ministry itself, or any questions about what they do? Yes.
I have a question. This is not a volunteer statement, but it is a question, and that is, for the altar guild, every church I've ever been associated with, the altar guild is a ministry of women of the church. Is that an unwritten rule or a formal rule in Episcopal teachings somewhere, or is it really open to all genders?
It is really open. We are trying to reform ourselves.
Okay.
I've had one man since I've been doing it, and going to the various conventions, I'm seeing more men. It's great to have a man on the altar at Christmas time to do the heavy lifting.
I'm really glad you brought that question up, because I served a church where the head of the altar guild was a man. And more churches are welcoming men into the altar guild to open the ministry up to everybody. So the requirement is open to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lee Williams, you're an excellent lecturer. Will you talk a little bit about how you prepare to proclaim the scriptures? And we have a number of excellent lectors. But will you talk a little bit about beforehand preparation that you might do to be able to proclaim those scriptures well?
Well, we get an email on Saturday. Susan sends it out, and she sends out all the lessons. So you're getting the Old Testament, the Psalm, and the New Testament. So when I get that, I print it. And then I've got it, right in front of me. And I read all of it. I don't just read the New Testament. Because sometimes the lecturer might have a problem and couldn't get a sub, and you might have to you have to pay attention, and you might have to jump up and do it yourself. So it's best if you've read it ahead of time. And as I said, when I do the reading to myself, I do it out loud. Because if you're going to stumble, you're going to probably do it then. And then you're prepared for that word. So even though I stumbled this morning, I think it happens occasionally, you just keep on going, or you say, I'm sorry, and you go back and read it again. And nobody minds, so you don't have to really worry about that. But I think for myself, I feel more confident if I have really paid attention the day before. Is that what you?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Can I say something about lecturing?
Absolutely.
When I read the reading that I to give, I always go to the Bible and see where it is, and then start back a couple of chapters and go forward a couple of chapters so that I get some reference as to what it is, so that I get some feeling about what to say. And oftentimes, this is, I probably shouldn't do this, but I do it anyway. I would love to be able to take maybe 2 sentences and say, this happened at this point in whatever, in Jesus' ministry or whatever, because sometimes they're just so out of the blue. And stand alone. Now, oftentimes Bill will also deal with the Old Testament reading, but usually not, because you're usually preaching from the gospel. And so that's a comment I would,
I also want to say something about lecturing, because I love lecturing too. I don't get to do it very often, but I love it, particularly the gospel reading. I mean, not the Old Testament reading. What I do is I print it out and then I mark it up. So I use the internet to find out how to pronounce things I don't know how to pronounce, because you can get sound files that pronounce things on the internet. And then I do read all the parts, all the parts of the liturgy, all the readings that are going to have, including the psalm, and I try to pick out those pieces. Sometimes there's really clear connections between the three, and so that way I know what to emphasize and what to slow up for. And I mark my thing into phrases so that I know how to pause and how to, articulate the parts that are most important. And for me, that also helps me not to lose the sense of it, because sometimes when you're just reading automatically, like we ran into one the other day where it's perfect or perfect. Those are 2 different words, and you can easily mess up the meaning if you pronounce it wrong because you haven't noticed what the end of the phrase is. So I do that too.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. There are actually wonderful tools out there. There's a book, a guide to pronouncing biblical names. There's a book that gives you 2-sentence introductions to different parts of the scripture, because people work for years in making the lectionary relating to each other, the Old Testament, the Epistle, and the Gospel. Thank you, that was great.
One last comment on that, Susie. So it sounds like in your preparation, what you're doing is you are better able to interpret that scripture reading because you have some background, some understanding. You aren't just reading words on a page, but you are interpreting that passage in the context that it was written and those kinds of things.
Another comment. I've been in 2 different churches where the rector allowed you to say possibly just a very brief introduction, which sometimes really clarifies, as Ralph said, the reading, because sometimes it's just like, where did this come from?
Yeah, like Lee, that's a good point. There is that book, and it does say Paul takes you, blah, 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 blah. It's only about 2 sentences, yes. Any other questions about the ministries of the church involved with worship? Yes, Betty?
Can I jump to something?
Absolutely, please do.
I have joked about how I got on the altar, but let me tell you, it has been the most wonderful experience of my life. I have never felt closer to my God than I do when I'm doing an altar guild service, preparing that altar. You think of it as giving the most wonderful dinner party in the world. You use the very best men and you put out your very best where you make it absolutely perfect. Anybody can do a slab of piece on a paper plate, but this is just absolutely has to be done perfectly. And I've had so many wonderful privileges doing it. You have no idea how much fun it is to spread that train of a wedding dress out behind a bride and send her down the aisle. And then you have the rather sad thing of putting a pall on the coffin before it goes down the aisle. We don't do that very much, but anymore, but before there were always coffins at funerals. And I had the wonderful privilege several years of going to Canuga. Canuga is the Episcopal gathering place in North Carolina, pretty close to Asheville. And we would gather there, all the altar dealers from Texas, Georgia, Alabama, all the southern states, except poor Virginia, they almost got left out, but they would sneak in. And I don't blame them. And it would be a week of worshiping together, sharing how we did things together, morning prayer, sometimes in the deep woods and sometimes by a lake, and evening worship at the chapel. We laughed and sometimes we cried. I tell you, it's not easy to read the prayers of the people when your nose is running. We always did some sort of craft. And I brought with me my favorite craft. Sometimes they were successful and sometimes they were absolutely awful. I'll let y'all come and look at this later. It's an Anglican rosary. And we made them, and the beads are actually made, the main beads are actually made from rose petals. That's how the rosary got its name. So you can imagine the cook at Canuga being absolutely astounded when the lady arrived with the black pot full of rose petals and said she wanted them cooked. Cooked, and then we rolled them and made our beads. And the little cross on the end is a cross that came from the Holy Land. One of the husbands got them while he was there, and they've all been blessed, and they made it an olive wood. And so I'm not going to pretend I use it, but I do treasure it. So, and at one time we had a very active altar guild for the diocese, and I served on that board, and for the deanery, and I also did that one. And I hope somewhere along the line we'll see a revival of those things, because it makes a difference when you get with women and men who are doing exactly the same thing that you're doing.
I had the joy of going with Betty on one of those one year, and we made handmade purificators, which are the square needle sewing. We did them, and there were men there that weekend as well. Yes, yeah, it was wonderful. Any other questions, or?
Susie?
Yes, Lee.
Just quickly, the rosaries that we use in the Episcopal Church are not the same as the rosaries used in the Roman Catholic Church.
Right.
They're Anglican rosaries, yes. And if you hold it up again, Betty, there is a difference because you center on the 4 beads and the bottom bead, and there's actually a prayer that takes you through each of the beads, and it is different. You're right. Yes, yes, it is different. Yeah.
That's a beautiful one.
That's a beautiful one. Yeah, yeah. Surely there's some burning questions about what we do with some of these ministries, and how you have all felt about being part of them, which is what's the most important. To hear the witness of how it has affected your faith journey is what really makes a difference. No other questions, thoughts, joys, concerns, upsetments, happiness? Nothing?
Can I just comment before we conclude?
Yes, you may.
I love this part of our worship and those ministries. So I think it was Lee that talked about the white robes that we wear up in the chancel as we worship together. Those robes practically keep what we're wearing from being a distraction, right? Somebody's wearing something fancy and nice, other people's perhaps something more plain, so that becomes a distraction. It helps to free us from that. But that's also, those robes are albs that are symbols of our baptism. It's the white garment that is placed on the newly baptized after they've gone through the waters. So it's showing, it's a visible symbol that all of our ministry is rooted baptism. Whether that is lay ministry or diaconal ministry or priestly ministry or even the bishop, you'll notice, will be wearing that white alb underneath everything else. So we might put on a chasuble as the presider over that alb, but all of our ministry is rooted in baptism. And so those white robes are a reminder of that. And then the other thing that I just wanted to comment on, Anne Marie mentioned about words being changed in songs and how upsetting that is. And having done a lot of camping ministry, I'll tell you that we have these camp songs that we sing. Traditional songs are sung at certain times and certain evenings of the week and all those kinds of things. And by the time the kids get to be about in middle school, so they've grown up singing these songs from the time they're little kids, by the time they get into middle school, if you change one word of those songs, they get so upset. You know, we often think of older people as being a little more upset about change and, you know, a little more set in their ways. But these kids, I'll tell you, if you change one word, that is not how we sing that song. And it has to be sung this way and with those words, and it just goes to show how powerful that is for young and old alike. So I just wanted to make those two comments and thank all of our presenters for this great program today.
Yes, and Betty, when you talk about a pall, that is the name of the cloth that goes over the casket, but it's also the same cloth in a smaller version that goes over ashes. And there's a reason for that, and it's because we come into the world and we go out of the world all equal. So you may be in a golden casket, but it's covered with the same pall as the person who might just be in a small little box.
And we don't put big bouquets of flowers on the coffin. If they're on there when they arrive at the church, they're removed and the pall is put in. You're just like everybody else.
And they're white because it's a symbol of our baptism. It's a celebration at a funeral and a celebration at a wedding and a baptism, and that's why we wear white. Yep. Any other?
And the orphan always sings, lift high the cross. It's not an orphan meeting if you don't sing lift high the cross.
Any other questions or comments about these important part of the ministry team here? That's part of our weekend service ministries. Any final thoughts on music or ushering?
Well, you know, one thought is for anybody that's not involved, just hasn't decided to volunteer for anything, believe me, it's worth it. It does a lot to the week of faith.
I would like to second that. Anybody, we want more people in the choir. We want people who sing, who don't sing, who just love sitting with us all. We welcome everybody, and it's a part of, if you get involved in the church, it all means more to you.
It is a family.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming. And next week we will do part 3 on the topic will be, Bill?
Topic will be, it won't be me.
It'll be church
It'll be whatever's next on the list.
The exciting news will be announced.
That's right. Come and find out.